My parents bought every grandchild a ticket for the family cruise. When it was my son's turn, my dad said, "He ruins everything." Instead, he gave the ticket to my brother's friend's son. I said nothing. I quietly canceled something they thought was guaranteed. By 1:15 p.m., my parents were at the cruise desk, staring at a red screen while the clerk asked for me by name. Palmer Farrow set the cruise tickets on the dining table like he was dealing poker. One envelope per grandchild. He slid the first to Donovan's oldest, then the second to Donovan's youngest, then a third to my niece from my cousin's side. Each envelope had a name written on it in Blanche's handwriting, the careful cursive she uses for Christmas cards and passive-aggressive thank you notes. The kids were tearing into them before the salad was served. My son Tate was sitting next to me, 8 years old, legs swinging under his chair because his feet didn't reach the floor. He was watching the envelopes move around the table with the kind of focus that only an 8-year-old can hold, the kind where his whole body goes still and his eyes track every movement like he's memorizing a pattern. He was waiting for his name. It didn't come. Palmer handed the last envelope to a boy named Finn Novak, 10 years old. Donovan's friend's son. Not a Farrow, not a grandchild, not family. Finn looked confused. His mother, standing by the kitchen island, looked confused too. Tate looked at me. "Dad, where's mine?" The table went quiet. I looked at Palmer. He was folding the empty stack of envelopes into a neat pile, pressing the creases flat with his thumb, taking his time. "Dad," I said, "where's Tate's ticket?" Palmer didn't look up. "We talked about this, Heath." We didn't talk about anything. He set the envelopes down and finally made eye contact. Not with me. With the table. With the room full of family members who were suddenly very interested in their salad. Every vacation, every holiday, every gathering, your kid finds a way to ruin it. He knocked over the centerpiece at Thanksgiving. He had a screaming fit at the fireworks. He can't sit in a chair for 10 minutes without kicking something. Palmer's voice was calm, instructional, like he was reading a safety warning. "I'm not spending $2,400 on a cabin for a boy who'll have the ship's crew calling security by the second night. Donovan's friend's boy, Finn, is a good kid. He earned the spot. He picked up his fork. And if you can't handle that, Heath, maybe ask yourself why your son is the only grandchild nobody wants to sit next to." 9 people heard that. My mother Blanche, sitting at the other end of the table, said nothing. She adjusted her napkin and took a sip of water, the glass clinking against her wedding ring as she set it down. My brother Donovan cut his steak. His wife looked at her plate. My cousin looked at the wall. Finn Novak's mother covered the boy's ears for 3 seconds and then let go, as if she'd realized it was too late. Nobody corrected Palmer. Nobody said, "That's not fair." Nobody looked at Tate. I looked at Tate. His lower lip pressed flat against the upper one, the way it does when he's holding something in that he doesn't understand yet. He didn't cry. He didn't kick the table. He didn't scream. He did the thing that 8-year-olds do when they learn for the first time that the world has a place for them and a place where they're not wanted. He went still. He put his fork down, pushed his plate forward an inch, and sat with his hands in his lap for the rest of the meal. His fingers were laced together, and his knuckles were white, and he stared at a spot on the tablecloth between the salt shaker and the butter dish until the dinner ended. The centerpiece he'd knocked over at Thanksgiving was a $12 arrangement from the grocery store. Blanche had laughed about it at the time. The screaming fit at the fireworks was an 8-year-old boy covering his ears during a finale that set off 4 car alarms. The kicking was restless legs. Normal. Every single thing Palmer listed as evidence that Tate ruins everything was a normal boy doing normal things in a family that had decided normal wasn't good enough. On the refrigerator behind Palmer's head, held up by a magnet shaped like a lobster, was a piece of cardstock cut into the shape of a rectangle. Tate had made it 2 weeks earlier, the day the cruise was first announced. He'd written his name in block letters across the top. Below that, the ship's name, copied carefully from the brochure. And across the bottom, in red crayon, "Cabin with Dad." He'd called it his boarding pass. Palmer sat 3 feet from it and never looked at it once. I said nothing for the rest of dinner, not because I had nothing to say, because I was doing math. Heath Farrow, 34 years old, licensed vac contractor. I own Farrow Mechanical LLC, a 2-truck operation that I started 9 years ago with a used van and a set of tools I bought at a liquidation auction. I install and service heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems for residential and commercial clients across 3 counties. My hands are usually cracked. My shirts smell like refrigerant. I know the difference between a capacitor and a contactor by sound alone, and I can diagnose a failed compressor from the driveway. I am also the person who has kept my parents' rental fourplex running since 2020. Units 1 through 4, all under one roof, one mortgage, one building. Every call, every repair, every seasonal tune-up. Every emergency at 2 in the morning when a tenant's heat dies in January. I have never invoiced my parents for a single service call. Not once. Not $1. 47 documented visits across 6 years. The worst one was January 14th, 2 years ago. 11 degrees outside. Unit 2's furnace igniter failed at 1:40 a.m. The tenant, a single mother with 2 kids under 5, called Palmer. Palmer called me. I drove 22 minutes in a truck with a heater that takes 15 minutes to warm up, replaced the igniter in a crawl space so tight I had to take my jacket off to fit through the access panel, and drove home at 3:15 a.m. with my fingers so cold I couldn't grip the steering wheel properly. The next morning I had a job site by 7:00. When I mentioned it to Palmer the following weekend, he said that's what family does. He said it the same way he says everything, like the conversation was already over before it started. Blanche once told Lark at a cookout that I liked staying busy. Lark smiled and said nothing, which is what Lark does when she's decided something about someone and doesn't need them to know it yet. I also co-signed the mortgage on the fourplex in 2018. Palmer and Blanche couldn't qualify a loan. Their credit scores were thin, their income was uneven, and no lender would approve them without a co-borrower. I had a 780 credit score and 6 years of steady business income. I signed the note. The bank approved the loan. Palmer shook my hand and said, "We'll never forget this." He forgot it before the ink dried. What Palmer didn't mention at the dinner table, because Palmer never mentions things that make him uncomfortable, is that the family cruise was booked on my credit card. My name on the reservation. My email on the confirmation. $18,400 for 12 passengers, 7 nights, departing July 5th. Palmer and Blanche had presented it at Easter as our anniversary gift to the grandkids. Blanche had printed the brochure. Palmer had given the speech. Everyone applauded. Nobody asked who was paying. The answer was me. It was always me. The night of the dinner, after I'd driven home, after I'd carried Tate inside because he'd fallen asleep in the car with his seatbelt still on, after I'd sat on the edge of his bed and watched him breathe for longer than I should have, Lark found me at the kitchen table. My wife is an occupational therapist. She works with kids who have sensory processing challenges, developmental delays, motor skill issues. She has spent 5 years watching Tate grow up in this family, and she has told me, clearly and without hedging, that Tate is a normal, energetic, developmentally typical 8-year-old boy. He fidgets because he's 8. He covers his ears at loud noises because his auditory processing is normal and fireworks are loud. He knocked over a centerpiece because he was reaching for a roll and his arm is 22 inches long and the table was set for adults. Lark has also spent those 5 years watching me absorb my father's behavior, and she has told me, in her specific and patient way, exactly what she sees. Your father told an 8-year-old boy that he ruins everything, Lark said, in front of 9 people, including the boy. And your mother sat there and adjusted her napkin. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. If anyone else's father said that about Tate, you'd have walked out of that room before the sentence was finished. But because it's your father, you sat there and did math. I remember the first Thanksgiving we spent with your family, she said. Tate was 3. He grabbed a spoon off the table and banged it on his high chair tray. Your father looked at him like he was a dog that had gotten into the trash. I saw it. I didn't say anything because we'd just gotten married, and I thought maybe I was overreading it. I wasn't. 5 years of the same look. 5 years of the same sigh when Tate walks into the room. 5 years of your mother not saying a word. She was right. She was always right. And she was right that the math was the thing I'd been doing since Palmer's mouth opened. The math was this. My name was on the cruise booking. My credit card. My email. My reservation. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to realize that the people who are supposed to love your child are the same people charging your credit card for a vacation they won't let him attend, this is Betrayal Unfolded, and this one is about the math. I took Tate's handmade boarding pass off the refrigerator Monday morning. I folded it once and put it in my wallet behind my driver's license. Then I picked up my phone and called the cruise line. I'd like to cancel reservation 7741, Bew, under Faro. That's a party of 12, mister. Faro, are you sure you want to cancel the entire booking? I'm sure. May I ask the reason? The account holder is no longer participating. The confirmation email arrived in my inbox 6 minutes later. Because I'd purchased the refundable fare option when I booked, the full $18,400 would process back to my card in 7 to 10 business days. Palmer never knew I'd paid extra for refundable tickets. That $600 upcharge was the best money I ever spent. I forwarded the confirmation to Lark. She replied with one word, good. I almost called Palmer to warn him. Then I looked at the boarding pass in my wallet and remembered the way Tate had put his fork down and pushed his plate forward. An 8-year-old boy who had been told in front of his entire family that he wasn't worth a chair on a boat. I put my phone in my pocket. 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' rental property replacing a condenser coil in Unit 3. Saturday morning. The tenants were out. I was on my back in the utility closet, pulling the old coil, when I heard Palmer's voice through the kitchen window above me. He was on the phone. He didn't know I was there. The maintenance fee covers everything. Donovan, Heath doesn't know about it. And as long as he keeps showing up when something breaks, he doesn't need to. A pause. No, he doesn't invoice us. He's never invoiced us. That's the whole point. The tenants pay $150 a month on top of rent for vac coverage, and the only person doing the work is Heath for free. It's been that way for 6 years. I stayed on my back in the utility closet for a full minute after he hung up. The condenser coil was in my hands. My knuckles were white around the copper. The dust from the closet ceiling was settling on my face, and I didn't wipe it off. I could smell the old refrigerant and the mildew from the drip pan and the faint diesel from the furnace, and all of it smelled like 6 years of Saturday mornings spent in crawl spaces I didn't have to be in. For people who were selling my time behind my back. $150 per unit per month. 4 units, 72 months, $43,200. My parents had collected $43,200 from tenants for vac maintenance that I performed at no charge. They had monetized my labor without telling me. Every time I showed up with my tools and my truck. Every time I crawled under a house or climbed onto a roof or replaced a filter at 10 o'clock at night, someone was getting paid for it. Just not me. I finished the coil replacement. I cleaned up my tools. I locked the utility closet, drove home, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that I didn't drink. The handmade boarding pass was next to the keyboard. Tate's red crayon, cabin with Dad. I opened my service log database. Every call, every date, every unit number, every part installed, every hour logged. 47 entries. 0 invoices. 0 payments received. I printed the full log. 47 lines on 3 pages. Some of them I remembered clearly. The January night in Unit 2. The compressor swap in Unit 4 that took 7 hours in August heat. The gas leak in Unit 1 that I found during a routine check that probably saved a tenant's life. Some of them I'd forgotten entirely. A thermostat replacement in March 2020, a duct repair in November 2021, a blower motor rebuild that I'd done on a Sunday morning because Palmer said the tenant was complaining. Every line was a day I'd given to my parents' business. Every blank in the payment column was a day my parents had decided that my time was free. Then I pulled the rental agreements for all 4 units. Palmer kept copies in a file cabinet in the garage of the fourplex, and I had a key because I was the one who serviced the building. The cabinet was unlabeled, but I'd seen Palmer pull lease forms from it when a tenant renewed. Every lease had a line item, HVAC maintenance fee, $150 a month, included in total rent. Signed by every tenant, collected by Palmer and Blanche Farrow, doing business as Farrow Rental Properties, LLC. The line item was on every lease going back to 2020. Every single tenant who had lived in those 4 units for the past 6 years had been paying $150 a month for HVAC maintenance that I was providing for free. I sat with those numbers for 2 days. Then I went deeper. Palmer's property insurance carrier had an online claims portal. Palmer had given me the login 3 years earlier when I helped him file a legitimate claim for hail damage to the fourplex roof. He told me to keep the access in case something else comes up, and he'd never revoked it. I logged in and pulled the claims history. 8 claims, over 4 years, all coded as VAC repair. Total paid, $16,200. Each claim listed the contractor who performed the work, Farrow Mechanical LLC, my license number, my company name. Attached to each claim was a scanned invoice on Farrow Mechanical letterhead with my company logo, my license number, and a forged signature at the bottom. Palmer had created fake invoices in my company's name to support every filing. I did not perform any of those 8 repairs. I was never contacted about them. I never submitted an invoice, a work order, or a completion certificate for any of them. Someone had used my contractor license number to file $16,200 in insurance claims for work that either never happened or was done by someone else entirely. My name, the name I put on every permit and every inspection form and every piece of work I've done for 9 years, was attached to filings I'd never seen for jobs I'd never done. If the state licensing board discovered that my license number was attached to fraudulent insurance claims, I could face a review. An audit. Suspension, revocation, my license is my livelihood. It's the difference between Farrow Mechanical LLC and a man sitting in a truck with no legal right to touch a compressor. It's the difference between Tate having a college fund and Tate having nothing. And my parents had put it on the line for $16,200 without asking me, without telling me, without ever once considering what it could cost the son who fixed their furnaces at 2 a.m. I sat at that table and stared at the claims printouts until the numbers blurred. The handmade boarding pass was still next to my laptop, cabin with Dad. Red crayon. The same boy they said ruins everything was the reason I'd built a company worth protecting, and the company I'd built to protect him was being used as a stamp on someone else's fraud. I almost stopped there. The cruise was canceled. The maintenance fees were documented. The insurance fraud was identified. It was enough to make my case. Then I found the LLC's operating agreement in the same file cabinet where the leases were stored. Inside it was a name I didn't expect, Donovan Farrow, listed as Property Maintenance Coordinator. Payment, $500 per month. Duration, ongoing since January 2020. Total, $36,000. Donovan's coordination consisted of exactly one thing, calling me when something broke. He didn't schedule. He didn't inspect. He didn't order parts or manage vendors or file permits. He called me, said Unit 2 heat's out, and collected $500 for the phone call. My brother had been paid $36,000 over 6 years to call me, and I had done the actual work for free. If you've been with Betrayal Unfolded for a while, you know there's always a moment when the numbers stop being numbers and start being a map of exactly how little your family thought of you. This was mine. Roland Keating's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building next to a sandwich shop. I sat across from him on a Friday afternoon with a file folder that held 6 years of exploitation in 63 pages. Service logs, rental agreements, insurance claim printouts, the LLC operating agreement, the cruise booking confirmation, and one folded piece of cardstock with red crayon on it. Roland is 48, former real estate litigator, now handles property and contract disputes. He read everything in 30 minutes, made 4 notes on a yellow pad, and looked up. The insurance claims are the most serious, he said. Using your contractor license without authorization on fraudulent filings is a criminal matter. You need to report that to the licensing board yourself, preemptively, before they find it on their own. If I report it, does it protect me? Self-reporting shows good faith. You weren't the filer. You have no matching invoices, no matching work orders, no matching completion certificates. The portal login records will show Palmer's IP address, not yours. Your license should survive a review. His claims won't. And the maintenance fees? The $43,200 in collected maintenance fees is a civil claim for unjust enrichment. Your service logs prove you performed the work. The lease line items prove they charged for it. The gap between those two facts is your case. He tapped his pen on the yellow pad. The $36,000 to Donovan is an LLC disbursement issue. He's listed as a coordinator in the operating agreement, but you can demonstrate that his coordination consisted of relaying service requests to the person who was already obligated by family pressure to respond for free. That's not coordination. That's a phone call with a paycheck attached. And the mortgage? The co-signed mortgage is your leverage. Without your signature on that note, the loan doesn't exist. You can't simply remove yourself from a mortgage, but you can demand that they refinance without you. Roland sends a formal notice stating that you will not consent to any future modifications, renewals, or extensions of the loan, and that you intend to pursue legal separation from the obligation. The bank reviews the remaining borrower's independent qualification. If they can't refinance a loan, which they can't, the bank has a co-signer who's actively seeking exit. That changes the risk profile of the entire loan. He closed the folder. You don't have to threaten anything. You just have to stop being the thing that holds their entire financial structure together. The structure does the rest. I filed the self-report with the licensing board on Monday. I mailed the demand package on Tuesday, and I waited for July 5th. July 5th. Departure day. The cruise was scheduled to leave at 4 p.m. Check-in opened at noon. I wasn't at the terminal. I was at home with Larkin Tate, building a Lego set on the living room floor. Tate was sorting pieces by color, the way he does, methodical and focused. The kind of focus Palmer calls obsessive and Lark calls organized. But Donovan's wife told Lark everything that night in a phone call that lasted 40 minutes. Here's what happened at 1:15 p.m. 11 people walked into the cruise terminal with suitcases and sunscreen and boarding documents. The terminal was crowded with families and couples moving toward the check-in counters. Palmer led the group. Blanche was beside him in a new sundress and a straw hat she'd bought specifically for the trip. Donovan carried 2 bags. The grandkids pulled roller suitcases. Finn Novak was there with his suitcase and a backpack, the boy who'd been given my son's spot, wearing a T-shirt with an anchor on it that his mother had bought for the occasion. Palmer stepped up to the check-in desk and handed over the booking reference number. The agent, a young woman with a headset and a name badge, typed it in. Her screen changed color. She typed it again. She clicked twice. She leaned forward and read something. Then she looked up. "I'm sorry, Mr. Farrow. This reservation has been canceled." "That's not possible," Palmer said. "I have the confirmation right here." He pulled the printout from his breast pocket, the one Blanche had laminated at the office supply store, and set it on the counter. The booking was canceled by the account holder on June 9th. A full refund was processed to the card on file. The agent turned her monitor slightly so Palmer could see the screen. Red text across the reservation canceled by account holder. Below that, in smaller print, the name of the account holder. My name. The account holder is listed as Heath Farrow. I'll need to speak with him to make any changes to this booking. The color left Palmer's face. Blanche's hand gripped his arm. Donovan set the bags down on the terminal floor. "I'm his father," Palmer said. "I can authorize the reinstatement." "I'm sorry, sir. Only the account holder can reinstate a canceled reservation. Would you like to rebook at the current walk-up rate? What's the walk-up rate? The agent checked her screen. For 12 passengers, 7 nights, the walk-up rate would be $31,400. The number hung in the air of the terminal. Palmer did not rebook. He did not call me. He did not pull out a credit card because there was no card that could hold that number. He stood at that desk while 11 people with packed suitcases stood behind him, and the line behind them stretched toward the entrance. A couple 3 spots back picked up their bags and moved to a different counter. Donovan's wife opened her phone and started doing math she already knew the answer to. Finn Novak tugged his mother's sleeve and asked why they weren't getting on the boat. She didn't answer. She looked at the floor. Blanche stood next to Palmer with her laminated printout in her hand and her new straw hat on her head and said nothing. She had co-signed every lease that charged the HVAC fee. Her name was on the LC that collected the money. She had sat at the dinner table and adjusted her napkin while her husband told an 8-year-old boy he ruins everything. And now she was standing in a cruise terminal holding a piece of paper that proved her son had paid for the entire trip she'd presented as her own gift. She did not cry. She did not speak. She folded the printout in half and put it in her purse. Palmer turned around and walked out of the terminal without speaking to anyone. Blanche followed. Donovan loaded the suitcases back into 2 cars. Nobody spoke for the entire drive home. 11 suitcases went back into the same closets they'd come out of that morning. The straw hat went onto a hook by the door and stayed there. 2 days later, Palmer called a family meeting. He set it for Monday evening. Same dining room, same table, same chairs. The table still had a scratch on the far corner from where Tate had dragged a toy truck across it 3 Christmases ago. Palmer had pointed at the scratch and sighed. Blanche had wiped it with a cloth that didn't remove it. The scratch was still there. The meeting was Palmer's idea. He thought he had leverage. He thought the family would rally behind him because Heath had ruined the vacation. He thought that if he sat at the head of the table and used his instructional voice and said the word ungrateful enough times, the room would agree that the problem was me. He was wrong about all of it. I brought the file folder. Lark stayed home with Tate. She kissed me at the door and said, "You don't owe them an explanation, you owe them the file." I went alone. Palmer opened the meeting standing. He stood at the head of the table the way he always stands when he wants to remind everyone that the house is his. Chin up, arms crossed, voice measured, feet planted. Blanche sat to his right with her hands folded. Donovan sat to his left with his phone face down on the table. Aunt Delia sat at the far end. She hadn't been invited. She'd heard about the cruise terminal from Donovan's wife, and she'd come anyway, which is what Delia does when something in the family needs a witness who won't flinch. Heath canceled our family cruise, Palmer said. He did it without telling anyone. He humiliated this family at the terminal in front of hundreds of people. He cost us a vacation that we'd been planning for months. And he did it because he couldn't accept that one seat on a boat went to someone else's child. He looked at me. I'd like an explanation. I let the silence hold for 5 seconds. Then I opened the folder. The cruise was booked on my credit card. My name on the reservation. My email on the confirmation. $18,400 charged to my Visa on March 12th. You told the family at Easter that the cruise was our anniversary gift to the grandkids. You never reimbursed me. You never offered to. You presented my money as your generosity. That was a family expense. We all contribute. Who else contributed, Palmer? Show me the receipt. Silence. Since 2018, I have performed 47 service calls across your 4 rental units. Every furnace repair, every ACK install, every condenser replacement, every emergency visit at 2 a.m. 0 invoices. 0 payments. I did it because you're my parents, and I thought you needed the help. I turned a page. During that same period, you charged every tenant a $150 per month HVAC maintenance fee. 4 units. 6 years. $43,200 collected for work I performed for free. You monetized my labor without telling me. Palmer's jaw tightened. That fee covers general maintenance, not just VAC. The lease agreement says VAC maintenance fee. I have copies of all 4 current leases. The line item is specific. Those fees are part of the rental operation. You don't get a say in how we run the business. I do when my contractor license number appears on 8 insurance claims totaling $16,200 for VAC repairs I never performed. I laid the claims printouts on the table with the forged invoices beside them. I didn't file these. I didn't authorize them. I didn't know they existed until 3 weeks ago. Someone created fake invoices on ferromechanical letterhead and used my license number and my company name to file fraudulent claims against your property insurance. If the licensing board finds these before I report them, I lose my license. I lose my company. I lose everything I've built in 9 years. Palmer's eyes went to the printouts. He didn't pick them up. I've already self-reported to the board, I said. They have the portal login records. The IP address on every filing is yours, not mine. Donovan shifted in his chair. He hadn't spoken since I arrived. And Donovan, I said, property maintenance coordinator. $500 a month. $36,000 over 6 years. For calling me when something broke. Donovan's face didn't change, but his hand moved from the table to his lap. I did more than make phone calls. Name one thing. Nothing. You collected $36,000 for calling your brother and saying Unit 2 heat's out. I drove there. I fixed it. I drove home. You sent an invoice to Mom and Dad and deposited a check. Blanche spoke for the first time. Heath, this is a family operation. Everyone has a role. My role was doing the work. Palmer's role was collecting tenant fees for it. Donovan's role was collecting management fees for watching me do it. And my son's role was being told in front of 9 people that he ruins everything and isn't worth a seat on a boat that I paid for. I looked at Palmer. You build insurance with my license, charge tenants for my labor, and told an 8-year-old he ruins everything. The ruin is yours now. Palmer's color drained from his neck upward, leaving his face the gray of old newspaper. His hands flattened on the table and pressed down hard. His left eye twitched. He leaned back in his chair, then forward, then back, unable to find a position that didn't make him look like the floor was moving. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked at Blanche. She was looking at the table. She had been looking at the table since the insurance claims hit the wood. Donovan tried. Dad didn't mean it that way. The claims were just paperwork. He wasn't trying to put your license at risk. 8 filings. 4 years. $16,200. Using my name and my license number. That's not paperwork. That's fraud. Can we just work something out? A payment plan? Something? You had 6 years to write me a check for a single service call. You wrote 0. The working something out window closed when Palmer told my son he ruins everything and gave his seat to a stranger's kid. Palmer tried one more time. His voice came out rough, like gravel being poured. You're going to destroy this family over a cruise ticket? This isn't about the cruise ticket, Palmer. The cruise was $18,400 of my money that you presented as yours. The maintenance fees are $43,200 of my labor that you sold to tenants. The insurance claims are $16,200 of fraud filed under my name. Donovan's management fee is $36,000 for making phone calls. That's $113,800 in money, labor, and risk that came from me and went to you. And the thank you was telling my son he's the grandchild nobody wants to sit next to. I closed the folder. This is the last service call, the last payment, the last favor, and the last holiday, I said. I've notified the mortgage lender that I'm seeking release from the cosign on the rental property. The bank will review whether you qualify on your own. My attorney has sent a demand for restitution. And the licensing board has my self-report and your filing records. Everything I've said tonight is documented, signed, and in process. I stood up. The handmade boarding pass was in my pocket. I didn't take it out. It wasn't for them. You didn't just exclude Tate from a cruise. You excluded the only person in this family who was doing the work, paying the bills, and showing up at 2 in the morning when your tenants called. I pushed my chair in. The air conditioner repairman is retired. Aunt Delia had not spoken during any of this. She sat at the far end of the table with her hands folded. She was 71 years old, Palmer's older sister, and the kind of woman who listens until she's heard enough and then speaks once. She looked at Palmer. You charged your own son's labor to tenants and put his license on claims he didn't file, Delia said. That's not how Dad raised us, Palmer. That's not how anyone raised anyone. Palmer did not respond. Delia stood up, picked up her purse, and walked out. She nodded at me on the way to the door. That nod said more than anything Palmer had said in 63 years. The bank's letter arrived 12 days later. Roland's formal notice had triggered a loan review. Palmer and Blanche could not independently qualify to refinance the fourplex mortgage without a co-signer. Their combined income from Social Security, Palmer's small pension, and the rental revenue did not meet the debt-to-income ratio any lender required. The bank gave them 120 days to refinance with a qualifying co-borrower or satisfy the remaining balance of $187,000. The rental income they depended on, the income generated by properties that I had kept running for 6 years, now had an expiration date attached to it. The licensing board opened a formal review of the 8 insurance claims. Palmer received an inquiry letter by certified mail requesting documentation for each filing, work orders, completion certificates, contractor sign-offs, and photographic evidence of repairs performed. He could not provide any of them because none existed. The carrier flagged all 8 claims for its own fraud investigation, separate from the board review. Palmer's property insurance premium increased by 40% at the next renewal cycle. The carrier reserved rights on all prior claim payments, which meant they could seek reimbursement of the $16,200 if fraud was confirmed. Palmer's property insurance, the same insurance my contractor license had been used to defraud, was now the most expensive line item in his rental budget. And the man who used to keep the cost down by doing the work for free was building a Lego set with his son 1,200 miles away. I almost answered the phone when Blanche called. Her voicemail was 11 seconds long. She said, "Heath, your father is very upset. This has gone too far. Please call us so we can sit down and work this out like adults." I played it once. I deleted it. Adults don't tell 8-year-olds they ruin everything in front of a room full of family. Adults don't collect $43,200 for someone else's labor. Adults don't put their son's license on fraudulent claims. Whatever Palmer was upset about, it wasn't the cruise. It was the end of the arrangement that had kept his air conditioning running, his tenants paying, his insurance claims filing, and his image intact for 6 years. The arrangement was me. And the arrangement was over. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Aunt Delia came to Sunday lunch at Palmer's house. 6 family members were there. Delia had spent the previous week on the phone with me, reviewing the documentation I'd sent her, the service logs, the tenant lease line items, the insurance claim printouts. She hadn't asked me to send them. I'd offered. She'd said, "Let me see it," which is how Delia asked for something, over the salad course without raising her voice, without setting her fork down. Delia told Palmer that she'd spoken with Heath and reviewed the paperwork. 47 service calls over 6 years. Palmer, not one invoice. And you charged tenants a maintenance fee for every single one. Then she set her fork down. I would be ashamed. Palmer's cousin stopped chewing. His nephew looked at his wife. His wife looked at her plate. The room went still in the way that rooms go still when the person with the most authority in the family says something that cannot be unsaid. Nobody defended Palmer. Nobody said there are 2 sides. Nobody changed the subject. The salad course ended in silence, and the main course never improved. 2 of Palmer's cousins stopped returning his calls after that Sunday. A third told Blanche at the grocery store that she'd heard about the rental situation and left it at that. The phrase rental situation became the family's shorthand for the thing nobody wanted to discuss at holidays, but everyone already knew about. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Palmer tried his last move. He showed up at my front door on a Saturday morning with an envelope. "I've got $3,000 in here," he said. "Consider it a down payment. We'll work out the rest over time. Just tell your lawyer to stop and let's put this behind us." I looked at the envelope. I looked at Palmer. His face was drawn, thinner than I remembered, and his eyes had the flat, watered look of a man who has been sleeping 4 hours a night for 3 weeks. He was holding the envelope with both hands. I said nothing. I stood there for 6 seconds. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door. The lock clicked. Palmer stood on my porch for a full minute. I watched through the peephole. He adjusted the envelope in his hands, looked at the door, looked at the street, looked at the door again. Then he put the envelope back in his jacket pocket, walked to his truck, and drove away. He didn't honk. He didn't call. He drove off the way people drive when they've just realized that the road they're on doesn't go where they thought it went. Silence was the only answer that matched the question. A man who tells his grandson he ruins everything and then offers $3,000 to make the consequences stop is not asking for forgiveness. He's asking for the air conditioning to come back on. 3 weeks later, a Friday evening, Palmer was sitting at his kitchen table with his phone in his hand. The rental units had not been serviced since June. 2 tenants had called about AC performance. Palmer had called 3 HVAC companies from the Yellow Pages. 2 quoted him $185 per hour. The third said they could come next week. He scrolled to my contact, pressed call. The number he'd had for 9 years connected to nothing. A 3-tone chime, then a recorded voice. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He tried again. Same recording. He opened the text thread. The last message was from 4 months earlier, me confirming a service call for Unit 2. He typed "Can we talk?" and watched the cursor blink for 2 full minutes. Then he deleted the words, 1 letter at a time, until the screen was blank. He set the phone face down on the table and sat there. The house was quiet. Blanche was in the bedroom. The hallway closet held the straw hat and the jacket, with the $3,000 envelope still in the pocket. Somewhere in Unit 2, a tenant was adjusting a window fan because the AC wasn't keeping up, and the man who used to fix it at 2 in the morning wasn't coming anymore. Palmer's dining room table. The chairs are pushed back. 63 pages of service logs and claims printouts were laid across this surface by the son he told to stay quiet. The fourplex has a 120-day clock. The HVAC units haven't been serviced since June. The carrier has flagged 8 claims. The house is quiet in the way that houses get when the person who kept everything running stops coming. 1,200 miles south, a hotel room on the 4th floor of a resort Lark found through an occupational therapy conference discount. $1,600 for 5 nights, 3 people, ocean view. Tate's handmade boarding pass is taped to the mirror above the dresser. His block letters. The ship's name he copied so carefully. Cabin with Dad in red crayon. It never made it onto a cruise ship. It made it somewhere better. Tate is standing on the balcony in swim trunks and a sun hat that's too big for his head, pointing at a pelican that just dove headfirst into a wave and came up with a fish. He turns around and looks at me with the kind of grin that 8-year-old boys give their fathers when they've just seen something incredible and need to make sure someone else saw it too. Lark is reading in the chair by the sliding door with her feet up and a glass of iced tea sweating onto the armrest, and she catches my eye over the top of her book and nods. The nod means, this is right. I'm standing behind my son with a hand on his shoulder, feeling the sun on my face, listening to the same boy who was told he ruins everything laugh at a pelican diving for a fish in the Atlantic Ocean on a Tuesday afternoon in August. He didn't ruin anything. He never did. He was 8 years old and he wanted a seat on a boat next to his dad, and the people who were supposed to love him told him he wasn't worth the chair. They were wrong. They were wrong about the chair, and the cruise, and the boy, and the man who kept their air conditioning running for 6 years without sending a single invoice. The boarding pass on the mirror caught the afternoon light. Red crayon on cardstock. Cabin with Dad. We had a cabin. We had each other. We had 5 days of sand and sunscreen, and a boy who pointed at every pelican like it was the first one he'd ever seen. And somewhere back home, 4 HVAC units were running a little harder than they should have been, and the man who used to fix them was standing on a balcony with his hand on his son's shoulder, watching the ocean, feeling nothing he needed to fix. If this story meant something to you, you're not alone. This is Betrayal Unfolded, and I'll see you in the next one.